Have you ever wondered how to balance academic freedom with responsibility or how to respond when conversations get complicated? So, welcome to Off Syllabus with Manny, where we talk about the hardest parts of teaching, the ones that do not make it to the syllabus. Today, we will talk about strategies to mitigate risk without sacrificing content, especially when you're talking about having difficult and hard conversations in the classroom. Joining me today is Dana Rabin. She's a professor of history here at Illinois. So let's dive into this conversation. Dana, when you think about academic freedom in your own teaching, what does it mean to you?
That's a great question. I don't think we really ask our new teachers to think about that in these specific terms. So it's a really good question, and yet it's in the media all the time. So I guess what I think of when I think of academic freedom is a safe place to raise questions about differences of interpretation and differences of perspective. So in history, primary sources are always guiding our study, but interpreting the voices we hear in those sources is often a difference of opinion. The important thing is to support our opinions of the right interpretation or the better interpretation with evidence. So students can bring in evidence from events, from people's lives, biography, from other sources. And so to create that safe space where there may be differences, there's two things you absolutely have to do. One is to define the classroom as a space of mutual respect. Community may be an aspirational term, so we start with mutual respect. But then that we're going to move through these sources and these exercises with evidence. So we're going to make evidence-based arguments. And I tell my students, history is not about fighting. You know, when you say evidence-based argument, when argument it's not a fight, but you have to bring your evidence when you, so they often ask me, students will ask me, is this paper just like my opinion? And I always say your informed opinion, informed by evidence. And so to me, it's a difficult thing to do, to make community in a classroom, to encourage people to have mutual respect or develop mutual respect. But it is the only way through.
Yeah. I find it interesting your description about like your opinion, because it sounded to me, so I'm a chemist by training, so I was thinking like the difference between guessing and a hypothesis is that there's some evidence behind one of them, right? So it's basically the same idea where like you're not just telling me what you think off top of your head without any evidence. You're actually doing some research and being educated about what you're sharing. And that's what we want them to do.
In fact, that's my job.
Good. You see, and history, science, same thing. We use the same principles.
That's right.
Yeah. So something you mentioned at the beginning of your answer was about we don't talk about this very often with new faculty or new instructors. Like we don't talk about academic freedom. So now taking that and putting that in the front forward, have your perspective about academic freedom has changed over time, thinking from when you start teaching to now where you are right now?
It has. I mean, for one thing, we're under scrutiny and our academic freedom is being circumscribed or pinched or surveyed. And so it's very much on my mind. But to get back to academic freedom within a classroom around around a conversation that might be, raise differences of opinion, I would say that it's important that all students feel comfortable. That's too much. All students must feel mutually respected. And the other thing that's changed in terms of academic freedom being this topic way out there that people talk about in abstract terms, and now it's right at our doorstep, right? So I have changed my opinion of it, but I also have changed just personally, having been in the classroom so many semesters, and I won't count for our audience, but I used to think there's a right interpretation of this document, which I've taught many times.
Mhm.
Now I still think I know what's right, but my interpretation is not what we're here to talk about. We're here to learn. My job is to teach critical thinking, critical reading, analysis, and argument making. And so it's the process of getting to the interpretation that is most important to me. And that is my job. I define it as my job to teach students that. And so I often will say to them, there's no right answer to this prompt. Where they think there is, and that my politics will influence how I read the paper. No, it's my evidence-based thinking that will influence what grade you get. If there is evidence and you bring it to bear and you support the argument, I don't like to say I don't care, but that's not what's gonna make the difference between an A and a B or an A and a C.
So I have a follow-up question to that. So I'm curious, now thinking more like in practical sense, did that involve you reframing the way you assess what students contributes? Because like me, like going back to science, it's easy to say the pH is 4.7 and I grade you based on whether you got 4.7 or not. Meaning like you just grade to the answer, but you're describing a process that is not about the answer per se, but about the process. So how do you adjust to your assessment to
It's
evaluate?
about both. It's about both. So in history, we can't count very high. So always threes. And if you're going to make an argument that this document or this person speaking meant A, B, and C when they were saying it, that's your interpretation of the document, you have to bring me evidence. Why are you interpreting this word that way? And you also have to bring quotations from the document. That's your evidence, but also the context. So if it was said during the Cold War, for example, you're going to mention the event that is actually framing this document. And then you explain what the words say, why you think they mean something or other. So yeah, it gets very specific, but only up to 3 because I can't count very high.
I love the tree. It's like something easy to remember as well. Like when you're trying to prepare something and you tell me you have to follow these 27 steps, I most likely won't do that.
It's very simple, and actually it really mirrors the way in which students are taught the sandwich in high school. And the only reason I know that is because I have kids who went through school. And so it's introduction, 3 paragraphs, and a conclusion. Well, each of those paragraphs should be making part of your argument and bringing that evidence to bear, to support. It sounds easier than it is, but it's something that I can teach. And it's something that they can learn.
So I'm gonna say that also shows that you're a great instructor, you're great at teaching because you make something complex sound very easy, like in 3 steps. So I think that's a very good skill. So thank you.
We're trying here.
Yeah. So something that you mentioned before about having not community, but a mutual understanding to engage in these conversations. I know that faculty prepare a lot to be able to do these things in the classroom. It's not like you show up one day and you're like, oh, let's do this conversation and I have all these skills. It happens. Like there's a lot of preparation that happens before engaging. So can you talk a little bit more about what type of preparations or what type of work do you do to be able to have these conversations or these discussions in the classroom?
Well, it's along 2 related lines. One is making a community of learners. You don't have to be a community outside of this classroom from 10 to 11:20 on Monday and Wednesday. We're a learning community. And that means learning each other's names. addressing each other by name, you're much less likely, I think, to insult someone or to disrespect them. Now, it's not that it won't happen if you're calling them by name and then make eye contact. So often I have to tell students, please stop dividing the world into adults and kids. You know, you are all adult members of this community, and we're going to talk like that just for 70 minutes every other, twice a week. So that's one. And I think working on community every day, every time you meet them is important. And you have to model it. You have to know their names and you have to look them in the eye when you talk to them. As the professor, that's you modeling for them how you want them to talk to each other. But then there are other ways in which one needs to kind of have a set of guidelines about how we discuss. And I think that those are important to generate within the classroom. About interrupting, about raising your hand. I love to have the idea of people not having to raise their hand and really having an organic conversation. Until people really know each other, maybe that's not possible. So just aspiring to these kinds of guidelines, I would make it very few, just 3 to 5, not more than that. We're not writing a dissertation about the guidelines for discussion, but having some way in which we interact with each other that is respectful. And also conveying this is the work of the humanities. The work of the humanities is talking about ideas in public. And yes, I think it should be a bumper sticker. So if you come to my office and disagree with me or only speak out that's not in public. And the way in which we refine our ideas and the way in which we often, my colleagues and I often refer to the discussion in class, which should happen every time you meet, as opposed to one unidirectional lecturing, is the way in which we're learning these skills of critical learning and critical thinking and analysis. And so you have to practice. No one's born knowing it. And that is what the discussion's about. So if you sit in the back with your baseball cap on and you don't say anything, great, but you're not practicing this very important skill. What is class participation? Why is it 25% in my class? It's not just being a bump on a log and taking up the seat. It's active listening, active participation. And no, there are not everyone loves doing it, but we all have to practice it. And there are ways I allow for those who are too shy or for whom English isn't their first language to practice it as well. That's why we do rough drafts, and that's why we exchange papers with each other. We are refining our skills, and we're learning how to do the work of the humanities, which is talking about ideas in public.
I love this. Talking about ideas in public. I mean, there's a lot of value to just saying things out loud, just to like self-reflection. But when you say out loud in front of others, there's lots of other values as well, because you get criticism, positive and negative, and then you get to really think about what you said and the implications that might have in others. So I'm so into this. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but you were talking about participation, and there's this idea that some people share that participation is just this thing that you do to give more points or to force students to come to class. And you are putting participation under a different light, because it's about the skill that people need. Like if you work in any field, you have to speak out. You want to grow your career, you need to be able to talk about what you feel, talk about what you see, talk about what you believe, because that's the way to make your mark. And that is participation. We sometimes don't put the value that brings.
And the person who only cares about grades, you're not going to get as good a grade if you have not processed this out loud and have people hear you, and then you talk, and then they talk. It's part of it. So you can sell it to anyone.
Yeah, I like this. Yeah. So, in general, when faculty are thinking about academic freedom, and I ask you to make an assumption about what everybody's thinking. So, sorry about that. But what do you think are the major like worries or concerns that faculty have, and do you have any strategies on how to like manage those things or mitigate those risks?
I understand that faculty are afraid and feel very vulnerable. The topics and the ideas that they are most passionate about are under scrutiny and also under attack. And they're worried that those topics will be taken off the board, like disappeared. And they're worried that they will be disappeared. So the stakes are extremely high. I do not, as a white older woman, a Nepo baby, if you will, my parents were in the academy, I will not dictate to anyone how to go about being brave about this. On the other hand, I think if we're not saying these things and talking about these ideas, then we're disappearing them ourselves.
Yeah.
So there is support. And I think there are a lot of people on campus who would be, I would go to a class and sit in. There are ways, again, it's community. Again, it's community. Get your peeps. And yes, it's time consuming, but the senior faculty on this campus have job security and they can help. Not all of them are willing, but there are enough of us. So I would never tell somebody, but I would support someone with my body, with my words, with my writing, who was willing to. It is going out on a limb.
Yeah. And I share that. And is there anything I can do? This is part of the reason what we're doing right now, talking about this thing, because we want people to not feel isolated. That this is a thing that everybody's facing, and hopefully seeing our faces and other faces here, like you can feel a little bit more of a sense that other people are here to help and support each other, because it's something that nobody can do alone. And it's something that we all need support because it's not easy. And sometimes you need somebody to just sit down and talk about things and try to move on.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also think there are other ways that we could construct to help, like a list of people who would be willing to come to a class if a faculty member is feeling like this is going to be a difficult day. Why not?
I love that. Yes.
It changes the dynamic, but maybe that's what we want.
I was going to say, like, that's not always a bad thing anyway. So, yeah. Okay. So, if somebody's listening from a different field, let's say engineering or business, is there one principle that they can borrow, that they can add to their teaching?
I would say don't avoid these topics. Students can tell they don't want to be condescended to. So ride into town with this and modesty, being humble. Like I said, I'm not telling them what the answer is. That's no longer my main job. My main job is to help them to learn how to think about difficult things. Or it's really, how do you deal with a world that is not black and white? Thank goodness it's not. But navigating the gray is difficult. And it's kind of our job as adults and educators to help students to navigate the gray.
And I would say, like, that is truth for like any discipline, any field. Because going back to me as a chemist, like, I struggle so much with students who wanted the right answer when sometimes that is not really a right answer. And sometimes even with theories, like, oh, this is a theory, and they believe like that explains everything. I'm like, no, that's just a model to explain one thing. You can't apply it to this other thing. So everything is gray. And I think that skepticism is what we really need students to really gain, because if we want to evolve and move forward, we have to teach them how to think critically, which I think at the end is what we're really talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any last thoughts before the end of the episode that you want to share?
I just so many of these worries or these contentious issues are easier to talk to with people you know, and talk about with people you know. And so working on community in your class is really I think it's really a good idea and worth the time. Galloping through content is never a good idea, and just to slow down and see the students in front of you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dana. It was a pleasure sharing with you today about academic freedom and how to hold space for having these hard conversations in the classroom, and sharing some strategies of how faculty can engage in these conversations and somewhat find a way to feel safe. And something else we talk about, and also be able to find community and find support across campus. So thank you. And for everybody, thank you for listening. And remember that a lot of the big learning and good learning happens outside the syllabus. So thank you for listening.